I am Geraldine, 28 years old, and just your average office worker living paycheck to paycheck in Chicago. My life changed overnight when I won $960,000 in the lottery after taxes. Finally, a way out of my cramped apartment student debt and endless budget spreadsheets. But when I shared the news with my family, my parents delivered an ultimatum that shattered me: give half the money to my struggling golden child brother Nathan or consider myself disowned. I chose myself for once and walked out. Before I continue this story, let me know in the comments what you would do if your family demanded half your lottery winnings. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about standing up for yourself when family crosses the line. Growing up as the eldest child in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family in suburban Chicago, I never imagined I would one day be forced to choose between my financial security and my family ties. My childhood home was a spacious 4-bedroom house in a good school district, with a manicured lawn and a 2-car garage that housed my dad Jack's prized Chevrolet and my mom Diana's practical minivan. From the outside, we looked like the picture-perfect American family. But appearances can be deceiving. The first clear memory I have of understanding my place in the family hierarchy came when I was 6 years old. My parents had just brought home my baby brother Nathan. I was initially excited to be a big sister, proudly telling everyone at school about my new role. That excitement quickly faded during his first birthday celebration. My parents transformed our backyard into a mini carnival complete with a bouncy castle, professional photographer, and custom cake that must have cost hundreds of dollars. Relatives I barely knew showed up bearing expensive gifts. The contrast to my own 6th birthday just months earlier was stark: a simple cake from the grocery store, a few friends over for pizza, and gifts that were practical rather than extravagant. "Nathan is just a baby," Mom explained when I asked why his party was so much bigger. "Babies need special attention." That explanation became a recurring theme throughout our childhood. When I turned 10, I asked for art lessons after discovering a talent for drawing. My request was met with, "Those are expensive, Geraldine. Maybe next year." Yet when 8-year-old Nathan expressed interest in baseball that same summer, my parents immediately purchased top-of-the-line equipment and enrolled him in an elite travel team that required weekend trips across the state. The pattern continued into our teen years. When I earned straight A's and made the honor roll my freshman year of high school, my parents responded with a distracted, "That is nice, honey," before returning to their conversation about Nathan's science fair project. When Nathan brought home B's and C's, my parents praised his effort and rewarded him with a new gaming system. The disparities grew more significant as we approached driving age. When I turned 16, I had saved nearly $3,000 from babysitting and working weekends at the local grocery store. My parents contributed another $1,000 toward a used Honda with over 100,000 miles on the odometer. "This will teach you responsibility," my father said as he handed me the keys. 2 years later, when Nathan turned 16, my parents surprised him with a brand new Ford Mustang complete with custom detailing and an expensive sound system. When I mentioned the obvious difference in treatment, my mother simply said, "Nathan needs a reliable car for all his activities." The fact that I had just as many extracurricular activities seemed irrelevant. The most painful disparity came when it was time for college. Despite maintaining a 3.9 GPA and scoring in the 95th percentile on my SATs, my parents informed me they could only contribute minimally to my education. "We have been saving, but with the economy and everything, there just is not much left," my father explained. I applied for every scholarship I could find and still had to take out $45,000 in student loans to attend a state university. Nathan, on the other hand, was sent to an exclusive private university with a price tag of $60,000 per year, all paid for by my parents. "Your brother has such potential," my mother gushed. We could not possibly let finances stand in his way. The unspoken implication that I somehow had less potential stung more than any direct insult could have. Despite all this, my relationship with Nathan was not overtly hostile. We simply existed in different orbits, rarely connecting in any meaningful way. He was not malicious toward me, just accustomed to being the center of attention. Our conversations were superficial, limited to holiday gatherings and family dinners. I sometimes wondered if he even noticed the preferential treatment, or if it was so normalized that it seemed natural to him. I left home at 22 immediately after college graduation, determined to build a life independent of my family's influence. I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a less-than-ideal neighborhood and secured an entry-level position at an insurance company. The pay was modest, but it allowed me to make minimum payments on my student loans while covering basic necessities. I learned to budget meticulously, cutting coupons and shopping sales, foregoing vacations and new clothes to make ends meet. Meanwhile, Nathan graduated with a business degree and immediately announced his intention to start his own tech company. My parents converted their finished basement into an office for him, allowing him to live at home rent-free while he built his empire, as my father proudly called it. They even provided the initial seed money of $50,000 to get his startup off the ground. Our family interactions became increasingly limited. I called my parents once a month out of obligation, conversations that inevitably centered around Nathan's latest achievements. I returned home for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and occasionally Easter, each visit reinforcing my outsider status. Gifts from my parents remained practical kitchen gadgets, plain sweaters, gift cards to affordable chain restaurants. Nathan received designer clothes, the latest electronics, and weekend getaways. By the time I turned 28, I had settled into a routine of work, sleep, and careful budgeting. I had managed to pay down my student loans to $20,000, a small victory that went unacknowledged by my family. I had a few close friends, colleagues I enjoyed working with, and a small but comfortable social life. I dated occasionally, though nothing serious developed. In quiet moments, I sometimes wondered if this would be my life forever, working a job that paid the bills but offered little fulfillment, watching from the sidelines as others pursued their dreams. Little did I know that fate was about to deal me an unexpected hand, one that would force me to confront the family dynamics I had spent years trying to escape. My daily life had become a predictable rhythm of alarm clocks, rush hour traffic, and fluorescent office lighting. I worked as a claims adjuster at Midwest Insurance Partners, a mid-sized company with decent benefits but limited advancement opportunities. To make extra money, I often volunteered for overtime shifts, reviewing claims late into the evening while my colleagues headed home to their families. Every Friday, as a small indulgence, I would stop at the corner convenience store near my apartment and purchase a lottery ticket. $10 a week was my only real splurge, a tiny investment in the possibility of a different future. I never expected to win anything significant. The lottery was less about realistic expectations and more about the brief moment of fantasy it provided, imagining what I would do if financial constraints suddenly vanished from my life. On a completely ordinary Tuesday evening in April, I was sitting cross-legged on my worn sofa, eating microwaved leftovers and half watching a reality television show. During a commercial break, I remembered the lottery ticket in my purse from the previous Friday. The drawing had been the night before, but I had been too exhausted after a long Monday at work to check the numbers. I pulled up the lottery website on my phone and retrieved the crumpled ticket from my bag. With casual disinterest, I began comparing the numbers on my screen to those on my ticket. The first number matched. Then the second. By the third matching number, my heart rate had accelerated. When all 6 numbers aligned perfectly, I felt a strange disconnection from reality, as if I was observing someone else's life through a window. "This cannot be right," I whispered to my empty apartment. I refreshed the webpage, certain there had been some mistake. The numbers remained unchanged. I checked my ticket again, reading each digit aloud to ensure I was not transposing numbers in my excitement. After checking the numbers 15 times, I called the lottery customer service line with shaking hands. The representative confirmed what I still could not quite believe: I had won $1.2 million before taxes, which would amount to approximately $960,000 after federal and state withholdings. I hung up the phone and sat in complete silence for nearly an hour, trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. My mind raced through possibilities: paying off my student loans, buying a comfortable home, investing for the future, perhaps even changing careers or starting my own business. For the first time, I could make choices based on what I wanted, rather than what I could afford. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, even when genuinely ill. I spent the day researching what lottery winners should do, learning about financial advisors, tax implications, and investment strategies. I made appointments with 3 different financial advisors and a lawyer specializing in sudden wealth management. On their unanimous advice, I opted to take the lump sum payment rather than the annuity option. I established a comprehensive financial plan. 70% would go into diverse investments, 15% toward a modest but nice home in a safe neighborhood, 10% for education, including the MBA I had always wanted to pursue, and 5% for immediate needs and a small celebration of my good fortune. For 2 weeks, I told no one about my winnings. I continued going to work, living in my apartment, and maintaining my usual routines while quietly making arrangements with financial professionals. I wanted to be absolutely certain everything was properly handled before sharing the news with anyone. Eventually, I knew I needed to tell my family. Despite our complicated relationship, it felt wrong to keep such significant news from them. Part of me hoped, perhaps naively, that this might be an opportunity to reset our relationship, to be seen as successful in my own right, rather than living in Nathan's shadow. After careful consideration, I called my parents on a Sunday afternoon when I knew they would both be home. My mother answered on the 3rd ring, her voice carrying its usual distracted quality, as if she was simultaneously doing something more important than talking to me. "Geraldine, what a surprise. Everything okay?" "Everything is great, Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Actually, I have some exciting news to share." "Oh," her tone perked up slightly. "Did you get that promotion you mentioned?" I had not mentioned any promotion, having learned long ago not to share career aspirations that might go unfulfilled. "No, actually. I won the lottery. A big prize." There was a moment of silence before my mother called out to my father, "Jack, pick up the phone. Geraldine says she won the lottery." My father joined the call, his deep voice booming with sudden interest. "Geraldine? What is this about the lottery?" I explained the situation, keeping my voice measured despite the excitement bubbling beneath the surface. As I shared the amount and my initial plans for the money, their responses evolved from disbelief to enthusiasm to something more calculating. "Well, this is certainly unexpected," my father said after I finished speaking. "Have you considered how this might benefit the family?" "I have some plans for investments and buying a house," I replied carefully. "And paying off my student loans, of course." Of course," my mother interjected quickly. "But this is such a blessing for all of us, really. Such an opportunity." Something in her tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. "I would love to celebrate with you both. Maybe we could have dinner next weekend." "Absolutely," my mother exclaimed, with more enthusiasm than I had heard from her in years. "Come over Saturday at 6. I will make your favorite lasagna." The fact that my favorite was actually eggplant parmesan, something she would have known if she had paid attention, did not escape my notice. "We are so proud of you, sweetheart," my father added. "Our little girl, a lottery winner. Wait until everyone hears that we have a millionaire in the family." After hanging up, I sat with mixed emotions. Their sudden interest in my life felt both validating and suspicious. Still, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps this windfall might bridge the gap that had grown between us over the years. I spent the next few days finalizing details with my financial team and beginning discreet inquiries about housing options in safer neighborhoods. I also researched part-time MBA programs that I could pursue while maintaining my job, at least initially. As Saturday approached, I felt a growing nervousness about the family dinner. I purchased a bottle of expensive champagne and a bouquet of flowers for my mother, telling myself this would be a new beginning for all of us. I drove to my parents' house with cautious optimism, unaware that the evening would alter the course of my family relationships forever. I arrived at my childhood home precisely at 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. The familiar 2-story colonial looked exactly as it always had. Perfectly maintained lawn seasonal wreath on the front door, warm yellow light spilling from the windows. For a moment, I sat in my car, gathering my courage and reminding myself that I was no longer the insecure girl who had left home 6 years ago. I was a financially independent adult with a windfall that would change my life. I deserved to celebrate this good fortune. The scent of garlic bread and tomato sauce greeted me as I walked through the front door along with my mother's perfume, the same brand she had worn since I was a child. The house was immaculate as always, family photos lining the entryway. I noticed immediately that the most prominent frames featured Nathan at various ages and achievements, while photos of me were smaller and less prominently displayed. "There she is," my father boomed, emerging from the living room with a glass of scotch already in hand. "Our lucky girl." My mother hurried from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron before giving me an uncharacteristically enthusiastic hug. "Geraldine, sweetie, we are so excited to celebrate with you." I presented the champagne and flowers, which my mother accepted with a bright smile. "How thoughtful, we will open this with dessert. I made your favorite chocolate cake." My favorite was actually carrot cake, another detail she had forgotten, but I smiled appreciatively nonetheless. "The house looks great. Nothing changes." "Why mess with perfection?" my father laughed, leading me into the dining room where the table was set with the good china, something usually reserved for major holidays. "We have been busy getting things ready for our special dinner." The conversation during the appetizer course remained light and surprisingly centered on me. My parents asked about my job, my apartment, and even a few of my friends whom they remembered. Their interest seemed genuine, if somewhat exaggerated, and I found myself relaxing slightly as we moved to the main course. So my father said, as he served himself a second helping of lasagna, "Tell us more about this lottery business." "How much did you say you won after taxes?" "About $960,000, I replied. "I have been working with financial advisors to make sure I manage it properly." My mother nodded approvingly. "Very responsible. And what exactly are your plans?" I explained my carefully considered strategy: investments, a modest home purchase, continuing education, and a small portion for immediate needs. The advisors all said the key is not to make dramatic lifestyle changes or big purchases right away. Lottery winners who do that often end up broke within a few years. Smart thinking, my father agreed, though something in his expression had shifted. "But what about family? Surely your good fortune should benefit those closest to you as well." I had anticipated this question and prepared a measured response. "I have been thinking about that. Maybe a nice family vacation next summer. I know we have not all traveled together since I was in high school." My parents exchanged a glance that immediately put me on alert. My mother set down her fork and reached for her wine glass. "That would be lovely, dear, but we were thinking of something a bit more substantial." "Substantial," I repeated, my stomach tightening. My father cleared his throat. "The thing is, Geraldine, your brother's business is at a critical juncture. His company has developed some revolutionary software, but they need additional capital to bring it to market properly." "Nathan is here, actually," my mother added quickly. "He will be joining us for dessert to explain everything. He has been working all day at the office, poor thing. Such dedication." As if on cue, I heard the front door open and close, followed by familiar footsteps in the hallway. Nathan appeared in the dining room doorway, dressed in business casual attire, his expression a carefully constructed mask of fraternal affection. "Congratulations, sis," he said, approaching to give me a brief hug. "Quite the windfall you have got there." "Thank you," I replied cautiously. "I hear your business is at a critical stage." Nathan took a seat at the table, immediately accepting the plate of food my mother hurried to prepare for him. "We have developed a proprietary algorithm for predictive analytics in the healthcare sector. The potential is enormous. But we need another round of funding to scale properly and beat competitors to market. We have already invested quite heavily in Nathan's company," my father added proudly. "Your mother and I believe in his vision." Nathan nodded between bites. "Dad and Mom put in $50,000 initially, and another $75,000 last year when we expanded the development team. The problem," my mother continued, "is that the company needs a significant infusion of capital now. About $400,000. The room suddenly felt airless. I looked from one family member to another, trying to process what was clearly a coordinated approach. And you want me to provide this money from my lottery winnings? Think of it as an investment, Nathan said smoothly. You would become a significant shareholder. When we go public or get acquired, your return could be 10 times what you put in. Or I could lose everything if the company fails, I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. 400,000 is nearly half of my winnings. Family supports family, Geraldine, my father said, his tone hardening slightly. We have always been there for you. I could not help the short, incredulous laugh that escaped my lips. Have you really? My mother's expression tightened. What is that supposed to mean? We gave you everything growing up. Did you? I asked quietly. Because from where I stand, Nathan was given everything while I had to earn the bare minimum. That is completely unfair, my father interjected, his face reddening. We treated you both equally. The dam that had held back years of resentment suddenly cracked. Equal Nathan got a brand new Mustang for his 16th birthday. I got $1,000 toward a used Honda with 100,000 miles on it. Nathan went to a $60,000 a year private university fully paid for. I graduated with $45,000 in student loans from a state school. Nathan got a $50,000 investment to start his business. I got nothing but expectations to make it on my own. A tense silence fell over the table. Nathan stared at his plate, clearly uncomfortable. My mother's eyes had narrowed and my father's jaw worked back and forth as he struggled to maintain his composure. We gave you what we could at the time, my mother finally said. Circumstances were different for each of you. The circumstances were that he was the favorite and I was not, I replied, my voice surprisingly calm despite the emotions churning inside me. And now that I finally have something, you expect me to give half of it to him. Again. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. Now you listen here, young lady. We are not asking you to give anything away. This is a legitimate business opportunity. And furthermore, we are your parents. We sacrificed for years to give you a good life. We put a roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back. The bare minimum required by law, I pointed out, while giving Nathan every advantage. This is not about Nathan versus you, my mother said, though her instinctive glance toward my brother betrayed her. This is about family supporting each other in times of need. And what about when I was in need? I asked. When I was drowning in student debt and living in a neighborhood where my car was broken into twice, when I was working overtime just to make minimum payments on loans for an education you could have helped with. Where was family support then? Nathan finally spoke up. Look, Geraldine, if you are not comfortable with 400,000, maybe we could discuss a smaller amount. Even 100,000 would help us bridge to our next funding round. I took a deep breath. I might be willing to consider 50,000 as a one-time gift, not an investment. I do not want shares or promises of future returns. Just the ability to help if I can with no strings attached. My father's face darkened further. 50,000. After you just won nearly $1 million. That is insultingly small. It is 10 times what I have in my current emergency fund, I pointed out. Money I worked hard to save despite my financial constraints. My mother reached across the table to grasp my hand, her fingers cool and tense against my skin. Sweetheart, try to understand. Nathan's company is our retirement plan. We have invested most of our savings. If his business fails, we could lose everything. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. This was not just about Nathan's company. My parents had gambled their financial security on his success. They were not just asking for my help, they were desperate. That was your choice, I said gently, withdrawing my hand. Just like it is my choice how to use the money I won. My father stood abruptly, looming over the table. No, Geraldine, this is not a choice. This is an obligation. We are your family. $480,000, half of your winnings, goes to saving your brother's company and securing your parents' future. That is non-negotiable. I stared at him in disbelief. Non-negotiable, it is my money. And these are our terms, he continued, voice rising. Either you agree to transfer the money by the end of next week, or you are no longer welcome in this family. No holidays, no phone calls, no relationship of any kind. You decide what matters more, your bank account or your family." The room spun slightly as the ultimatum sank in. I looked at my mother, hoping to see some disagreement with this extreme position, but her expression remained resolute, though her eyes would not meet mine. Nathan looked genuinely uncomfortable but said nothing to contradict our father. In that moment, with perfect clarity, I understood that nothing had changed since my childhood. I was still the outsider, still less valued, still expected to sacrifice while Nathan received. The only difference was that now I had the power to say no. I stood slowly, gathering my purse and jacket. I have always been an afterthought in this family. The backup child, the one who was expected to achieve without support, to give without receiving. I foolishly thought winning the lottery might change how you see me, might make you proud or happy for me without immediately calculating what you could get out of it. I was wrong. "Geraldine, do not be dramatic," my mother started. "I am not being dramatic. I am finally being honest," I interrupted. "All my life, I have been the outsider in my own family. Today, I am choosing myself." I walked toward the door, turning back one last time. "You have made your choice, and now I am making mine." The drive home from my parents' house that night remains a blur in my memory. Tears streamed down my face as I navigated the familiar streets, my hands shaking so badly. I had to pull over twice to compose myself. The finality of what had just happened crashed over me in waves. Had I really just been disowned over money? Had my family truly given me an ultimatum that made their conditional love explicitly clear? My apartment, which had always felt like a temporary stop on the way to something better, now seemed like a lonely island. I collapsed onto my sofa, still in my dinner clothes, and allowed myself to fully break down. The sobs came from deep within years of suppressed hurt and disappointment finally finding release. I called in sick to work the following Monday, something I had rarely done even when genuinely ill. I could barely focus on basic tasks, let alone complex insurance claims. My mind kept replaying the dinner conversation, searching for something I could have said differently, some magic words that might have made my family see me as a person with valid feelings rather than an ATM to be accessed. By Tuesday, the messages started. First came texts from my mother, alternating between guilt trips. "I cried all night, thinking about how you have abandoned us, and anger. After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us." My father's messages were shorter and more direct. "You are making a grave mistake, and family should come before money, Geraldine." I responded only once, writing, "I am not choosing money over family. I am choosing self-respect. Please respect my decision." Then I muted their conversation threads, unable to bear the constant notifications. By the end of the week, other relatives began to call. My Aunt Vivian, my mother's sister, left a voicemail dripping with false concern. "Geraldine, sweetie, we are all so worried about this situation. Your parents are devastated. Surely there is a compromise to be found. Nathan has always looked up to you, you know." That last statement was so blatantly false, it would have been laughable if the situation were not so painful. Nathan had barely acknowledged my existence growing up, except when forced to interact at family gatherings. My Uncle Robert called next, his approach more direct. "Your father tells me you have come into some money and are refusing to help the family. That does not sound like the Geraldine I know. Your brother has a real opportunity here, and family supports family." It became clear that my parents were spinning a narrative throughout the extended family. Ungrateful Geraldine had received a windfall and selfishly refused to help her struggling brother and parents. No mention of the ultimatum, the demand for half my winnings, or the years of preferential treatment Nathan had received. The following Sunday, I woke to 17 missed calls from various family members and a group text from my cousins expressing their disappointment in my choices. The pressure was mounting, and I felt my resolve beginning to waver. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe $480,000 was a reasonable request from family. In a moment of weakness, I actually went so far as to log into my bank account finger hovering over the transfer button. The thought of being welcomed back into the family fold was tempting even if it came at such a steep price. Before I could complete the transaction, my phone rang. It was Linda, a colleague from work who had become something of a mentor to me over the past 2 years. I had confided in her about the lottery win and the subsequent family drama. "How are you holding up?" she asked without preamble. "Not great," I admitted. "I am actually considering just giving them the money to end this nightmare." Linda's response was immediate and firm. "Geraldine, listen to me. What your family is doing is emotional blackmail, pure and simple. If you give in now, you are setting a precedent that will follow you for the rest of your life. Every major decision, every financial windfall, they will expect control. Is that what you want?" Her words cut through the fog of guilt and self-doubt. "No," I whispered, "but I do not want to lose my family either. A family that only wants you when you can provide financial benefit is not a family worth preserving at all costs," Linda said gently. "I know that sounds harsh, but as someone who has watched you work harder than anyone else in the office while dealing with constant financial stress, I cannot stand by and watch you give away your chance at security and independence." That conversation was the lifeline I needed. I logged out of my bank account and instead made an appointment with a therapist specializing in family trauma. If I was going to navigate this new reality, I would need professional support. The harassment from my family continued for another week before I finally took the drastic step of blocking their numbers. The constant barrage of guilt, anger, and manipulation was taking a toll on my mental health, affecting my sleep appetite and work performance. I could not heal while remaining connected to the source of my pain. Those first few weeks of separation were excruciating. I would find myself crying in the shower in my car during lunch breaks or while doing simple tasks like grocery shopping. Certain songs on the radio or television shows would trigger memories of happier family times, causing a fresh wave of grief. Despite the years of unequal treatment, these were still the people who had raised me who featured in my earliest memories, whose approval I had sought for decades. My therapist, Dr. Caroline, helped me understand that I was mourning not just the loss of my current family relationships, but also the ideal family I had always wished for but never truly had. "You are grieving the parents you deserved but did not get," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "That grief is valid and needs to be processed." She also helped me recognize the patterns of emotional abuse that had characterized my family dynamics for years. The constant comparison to Nathan, the withholding of affection and support, the explicit and implicit messages that I was somehow less deserving, less important, less lovable, all contributed to a harmful environment that had shaped my self-perception in negative ways. The lottery win did not create this problem, Dr. Caroline pointed out. It simply brought to the surface dynamics that have always been there. Sometimes it takes a crisis or significant event to reveal the true nature of our relationships. Those words resonated deeply with me. The lottery had not changed my family. It had merely illuminated what had always been true, but what I had spent years trying not to see clearly. The realization was both painful and strangely liberating. As the weeks turned into months, I slowly began to rebuild my life without the constant background noise of family disapproval and obligation. I moved forward with my financial plans, working closely with my advisors to ensure long-term security. The freedom to make decisions based solely on what was best for me, without having to consider how my choices would be judged by my family, was a new and empowering experience. Still, there were moments of doubt and loneliness. Birthdays, holidays, and other milestones would trigger waves of sadness as I confronted the reality of my new normal. I wondered if I had made the right choice, if the price of my financial independence was too high. But each time these thoughts surfaced, I reminded myself of the ultimatum my father had delivered and asked whether a family that truly loved me would have forced such a choice in the first place. The answer, though painful, was always clear. 3 months after the fateful dinner at my parents' house, I moved out of my cramped apartment into a secure, modern two-bedroom condo in a vibrant neighborhood with tree-lined streets and local businesses within walking distance. The building had security cameras, a doorman, and a small gym, luxuries I had never imagined having access to before the lottery win. For the first time, I did not worry about strange noises at night or whether my car would be intact in the morning. The process of furnishing my new home became unexpectedly therapeutic. I chose each piece with care, creating a space that reflected my personal taste, rather than being limited to what was on clearance or available secondhand. A comfortable sectional sofa in a rich teal, a dining table made of reclaimed wood artwork that spoke to me all came together to create a sanctuary that felt truly mine. Working with my financial advisors, I established a diversified investment portfolio designed for long-term growth and security. We created separate accounts for different goals: retirement, housing, education, and a small fund for travel and experiences. I paid off my remaining student loans in one satisfying transaction, feeling a weight lift that I had carried since graduation. With my immediate financial needs addressed, I turned my attention to longer-term aspirations. I had always wanted to pursue an MBA, believing it would open doors to more fulfilling career opportunities, but the cost had been prohibitive. Now, with financial barriers removed, I researched programs and applied to a prestigious evening MBA program at a well-regarded business school in the city. The acceptance letter arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I stood in my kitchen staring at the official letterhead with tears in my eyes. This was an opportunity I had earned through my own merits, not because of family connections or financial support. My undergraduate grades, work experience, and admissions essays had secured my place. The fact that I could now afford the tuition was the lottery's contribution, but the acceptance was mine alone. As I adjusted to my new circumstances, I realized I needed more than financial and educational growth. The family situation had left emotional scars that required attention. Through my therapist's recommendation, I joined a support group for adults from dysfunctional families. Meeting others who understood the complex emotions of family estrangement offered validation I had not known I needed. It was in this group that I met Jennifer, a 32-year-old marketing executive who had cut ties with her narcissistic mother 3 years earlier. The first year is the hardest, she told me after a particularly emotional session. You question yourself constantly, but it gets easier. You start building your chosen family, people who value you for who you are, not what you can give them. Jennifer and I began meeting for coffee outside of group sessions, and a friendship blossomed. She introduced me to her circle of friends, warm and genuine people who welcomed me without judgment or agenda. For the first time, I experienced relationships based on mutual respect and affection rather than obligation or comparison. My therapy sessions continued weekly, providing a safe space to process my grief and anger. Dr. Caroline helped me identify and challenge the negative self-perceptions I had internalized from years of being the less favored child. Your worth was never determined by how your parents treated you, she reminded me often. Their limitations as parents reflect on them, not on you. We worked through exercises designed to strengthen my self-esteem and establish healthy boundaries in relationships. I learned to recognize when I was sacrificing my own needs to please others, a pattern developed through years of trying to earn my parents' approval. Slowly, I began to trust my own judgment and prioritize my well-being without guilt. My professional life also began to transform. With the pressure of financial insecurity removed, I approached my work with renewed focus and creativity. I suggested process improvements that saved the department significant time and resources, earning recognition from senior management. 6 months after moving into my new home, I was offered a promotion to team leader, a position with greater responsibility and substantially higher compensation. You have really come into your own these past few months, my boss commented during the promotion discussion. There is a confidence in your work that was not there before. Whatever changes you have made in your life, they are clearly working for you. The irony was not lost on me that stepping away from my biological family had created space for me to flourish in ways I had never imagined possible. By removing the constant undercurrent of inadequacy that had characterized my family relationships, I had freed up emotional energy to invest in my own growth and happiness. As I established new routines and relationships, I also began learning to set and maintain boundaries. When a cousin I had always been close with reached out ostensibly to check on me but quickly pivoting to questions about whether I might reconsider helping the family, I was able to calmly but firmly end the conversation without feeling compelled to justify my choices. "I value our relationship," I told her, "but my financial decisions are not up for discussion. If you would like to maintain contact, it needs to be without any involvement in the situation between me and my parents." She did not call again, confirming that her interest had been primarily as an emissary rather than from genuine concern. Though painful, these clarifying moments helped me distinguish between authentic connections and those tainted by ulterior motives. 6 months into my estrangement from my immediate family, I met Daniel at a fundraising event for a local literacy program. He was a high school English teacher with kind eyes and an easy laugh, who asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to the answers. Our first date lasted 5 hours conversation flowing effortlessly from books to travel to childhood memories. When the topic of family inevitably arose, I shared a simplified version of my situation, wary of how it might be received. Daniel's response surprised me. "Family is complicated," he said without judgment. "I believe relationships should be measured by how they impact your well-being, not by biology or obligation." As our relationship developed, Daniel demonstrated consistent respect for my boundaries regarding family discussions. He never pressured me to reconcile or suggested I was overreacting responses I had encountered from previous dating partners. Instead, he supported my decisions while providing a shoulder to lean on during difficult moments like holidays or my birthday. Despite the positive changes in my life, there were still moments of profound sadness and doubt. The first Thanksgiving after the estrangement was particularly difficult. While friends invited me to join their celebrations, the absence of family traditions left a hollow feeling I could not entirely shake. Christmas brought similar challenges, memories of childhood excitement and family rituals creating a bittersweet ache. During these moments, I would sometimes question my decision. Was financial independence worth the loss of family connection, however flawed those connections might have been? Would I regret this choice years down the road when reconciliation might be more difficult or even impossible? My therapist helped me work through these doubts, reminding me that grief and uncertainty did not mean I had made the wrong choice. Difficult decisions can be right even when they hurt, she explained. The pain you feel now does not invalidate the legitimate reasons for your boundary setting. As I approached the 1-year anniversary of my lottery win, I took time to reflect on everything that had changed. Financially, I was secure in ways I had never imagined possible. Educationally, I was thriving in my MBA program, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working full-time. Professionally, my recent promotion had opened new opportunities for growth and leadership. Personally, I had developed genuine friendships and a promising romantic relationship. Most importantly, I had begun to recognize my own worth independent of external validation. The constant sense of inadequacy that had followed me since childhood was gradually being replaced by self-assurance and confidence. I was learning that my value was intrinsic, not determined by comparison to others or by what I could provide to those around me. The lottery had given me financial freedom, but the true transformation came from the difficult choices that followed. By standing firm in my self-respect, even at the cost of family relationships, I had begun a journey of self-discovery and healing that money alone could never have provided. 18 months after walking out of my parents' house, my life had settled into a new normal. I had completed half of my MBA program with excellent grades, received another promotion at work, and my relationship with Daniel had deepened into something stable and nurturing. My investment portfolio was performing well, and I had even begun mentoring young women from disadvantaged backgrounds through a community program sharing financial literacy skills and career guidance. The wounds from my family estrangement had not completely healed, but they had scarred over enough that I could go weeks without the sharp pain of loss. I had created holiday traditions with friends, celebrated milestones with my chosen family, and built a life that felt increasingly authentic and fulfilling. Then, on an ordinary Wednesday morning, an email appeared in my inbox from an address I immediately recognized. My mother, who had not attempted contact in nearly 6 months, had written a message with the subject line, "When you are ready to talk." My heart raced as I stared at the unread email. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, to protect the peace I had worked so hard to establish. Another part, the daughter who still longed for parental love despite everything, needed to know what it contained. After several deep breaths and a quick text to my therapist requesting an emergency session that evening, I clicked open the email. "Geraldine," it began without the usual "Dear" prefix. "I hope this message finds you well. Much has changed since we last spoke, and I believe it is time we had a conversation. Nathan's company has closed, and your father and I are facing financial difficulties we did not anticipate. This is not an attempt to ask for money. I want to be clear about that. Rather, it is an acknowledgement that perhaps we have made mistakes that cannot be undone, but might be understood better through dialogue. If you are willing, we would appreciate the opportunity to meet in person. We will respect whatever boundaries you need to feel comfortable. Mom." The email was notably different from previous communications. There was no guilt-tripping, no accusations, no demands. The tone was subdued, almost humble, which was so unlike my mother that I read it multiple times, trying to detect the manipulation I had come to expect. That evening, my therapist and I discussed the email at length. "What do you want from this potential meeting, Doctor?" Caroline asked. Setting aside what they might want or expect, what outcome would feel positive for you? It was a clarifying question. After careful consideration, I realized I wanted 3 things: acknowledgement of the unfair treatment throughout my life, a genuine apology, and respect for my boundaries moving forward. I did not expect all 3, but identifying my desires helped me approach the situation with clearer expectations. "Meeting them does not obligate you to anything," Dr. Caroline reminded me. "You can leave at any point if it becomes unhealthy. And you can set the terms, including location and duration." After several days of reflection, I replied to my mother's email, suggesting we meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown that offered enough privacy for conversation while remaining a public space. I specified a time limit of 1 hour and stated that I would be coming alone. "I am willing to listen," I wrote, "but I need to be clear that this meeting does not automatically change our current situation. I am still processing everything that happened." My mother responded within hours, accepting all my conditions without protest, another surprising departure from her usual approach. We arranged to meet the following Saturday afternoon. When the day arrived, I dressed carefully in an outfit that made me feel confident and composed, a well-tailored blazer over a simple blouse, comfortable yet professional. Daniel offered to wait nearby in case I needed support, but I decided this was something I needed to face alone. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early to select a table in a quiet corner and center myself. When my parents walked in precisely at the agreed time, the sight of them was shocking. In just 18 months, they seemed to have aged years. My father's confident posture had diminished, his shoulders slightly stooped. My mother's hair showed more gray than I remembered, and fine lines had deepened around her eyes and mouth. They were both dressed well, but not expensively, another deviation from their usual presentation. "Geraldine," my mother said softly as they approached the table, "thank you for agreeing to meet." "You look well," my father added, his usual booming voice subdued. I gestured to the chairs across from me. "Please sit down. Would you like coffee?" I was about to order. The initial small talk was awkward but civil, as we navigated the strange terrain of conversation after such a significant rupture. They asked about my health, my work, my new home, careful questions that required no deep revelation. I provided basic answers, maintaining emotional distance while assessing their demeanor. Once we had our beverages, my father cleared his throat. "I suppose we should address the elephant in the room. Nathan's company failed completely about 6 months ago. The technology was promising, but the market shifted, and competitors with more resources moved faster. We lost everything we invested, including a second mortgage on the house." "We are not here to ask you for money," my mother interjected quickly, perhaps seeing something in my expression. That is not why we wanted to talk to you. Then why did you? I asked directly. It has been 18 months of silence, apart from the initial attempts to change my mind. My father looked down at his coffee cup. Because we were wrong, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. Not just about the money, though. That too. But about everything. I waited, not willing to fill the silence or make this easier for them. After a moment, my mother continued. When you left that night, we were angry and hurt. We told ourselves you were being selfish and ungrateful. But as time passed and we really thought about what you said about how we had treated you compared to Nathan, we started to see things differently. It was easier to blame you than look at ourselves, my father admitted. But losing everything forced us to confront some hard truths. We favored Nathan. We made excuses for him. We expected you to make your own way while giving him every advantage. My mother's eyes had filled with tears. I keep thinking about specific moments. Your 16th birthday, when you were so grateful for that small contribution toward a used car, never complaining that Nathan later got a new one? Or when you graduated with honors and we barely acknowledged it because we were focused on Nathan's baseball tournament. These specific memories accurately recalled caught me off guard. I had expected generalities, not evidence that they had actually reflected on concrete instances of unequal treatment. Where is Nathan now? I asked, realizing he was conspicuously absent from this reconciliation attempt. He will be joining us shortly, my father said. He wanted to give us time to talk first. He is different now. The failure of his business hit him hard, but in some ways it was the best thing that could have happened to him. As if on cue, the coffee shop door opened and Nathan walked in. Like our parents, he looked changed. Gone was the confident swagger, the expensive clothes, the air of entitlement. He spotted us and approached cautiously, carrying himself with a humility I had never seen in him before. Geraldine, he said with a slight nod. Thank you for agreeing to see us. I gestured to the empty chair. You wanted to be part of this conversation. I needed to be, he corrected, sitting down. I owe you an apology more than anyone. The Nathan I remembered would never have admitted owing anyone anything, least of all an apology. Intrigued despite my wariness, I asked, for what specifically? He met my gaze directly. For never acknowledging the advantages I had. For taking it for granted that I deserved more support, more opportunities, more of everything than you did. For standing by silently that night when Dad gave you that ultimatum, even though I knew it was wrong. I had prepared myself for manipulation, for subtle attempts to circumvent my boundaries, but the straightforward acknowledgement of specific wrongs caught me off guard. What happened after the company failed? I asked. Nathan's smile was rueful. Reality happened. I lost everything, including my sense of identity. I had to move out of Mom and Dad's basement, get a regular job for the first time in my life, and learn to live within a budget. Turns out, I was not the business genius everyone thought. Just a privileged kid who had never faced real consequences for failure. He is working in IT support now, my mother added, with what sounded like genuine pride. Starting at the bottom and working his way up properly. The pay is modest, but it is honest work, Nathan said. And I am paying rent in my apartment, paying off debts, learning what it means to be financially responsible. Things you have known since college. I took a sip of my now lukewarm coffee, processing this apparent transformation. Why now? Why reach out after all this time? My father leaned forward slightly. Because it took us this long to truly understand what we had done. And because we realized that while we lost our investments, what you lost was much more significant. You lost the belief that your family loved you unconditionally. That is a far greater loss than any amount of money. We do not expect forgiveness, my mother added. We just wanted you to know that we see now what we could not or would not see before. I studied each of their faces, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. What I saw instead was something I had rarely witnessed from my family: genuine remorse. I cannot pretend the past did not happen, I said carefully. The patterns were too consistent. Too damaging for too long. We are not asking you to, my father replied. We just hoped that perhaps with time and better boundaries we might find a way to have some kind of relationship again. On your terms. Not ours. Nathan cleared his throat. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but if there is any possibility of starting over as adults as equals this time, I would like that opportunity. I thought of all the work I had done in therapy, all the progress I had made in building a life centered on self-respect and healthy relationships. Reconciliation had never been my goal yet, here it was unexpectedly possible. I cannot make any promises, I said finally, but I am willing to consider small steps, very small steps with clear boundaries. Relief washed over their faces, tempered with appropriate caution. They understood this was not forgiveness or an erasing of the past, merely an opening of a door that had seemed permanently closed. There is one thing I can offer, I said, after a moment of reflection. Not money, I clarified quickly. But Nathan, if you are serious about rebuilding your career from the ground up, I could put in a word at my company. We have entry-level positions in the IT department that might match your skills. You would have to interview and prove yourself like anyone else, but I could at least get your resume to the right person. Nathan's eyes widened slightly. That would be more than generous. Thank you for even considering it. As our meeting drew to a close, my mother reached across the table, her hand stopping short of touching mine. We are proud of you, Geraldine. Not because of the lottery, but because of who you are. I wish we had told you that more often when it mattered most. For the first time in our conversation, tears pricked at my eyes. These were the words I had longed to hear throughout my childhood and young adulthood. The validation I had sought through achievement after achievement. They came far too late to heal those old wounds completely, but their belated arrival still held meaning. Thank you for saying that, I replied softly. It matters even now. We parted with tentative plans to meet again in a month, no commitments beyond that single future conversation. As I watched them walk away, I felt neither the triumph of vindication nor the warmth of reconciliation, but something more complex. The cautious hope that perhaps with time and continued effort on all sides, some new form of family relationship might be possible, one built on mutual respect, rather than obligation or comparison. A year has passed since that pivotal coffee shop meeting with my family, and the landscape of my life has continued to evolve in ways I never could have predicted. The journey from estrangement to cautious reconnection has been neither linear nor simple, but it has been profoundly educational. Our family relationship has been rebuilt slowly, brick by careful brick. We began with monthly coffee meetings, then gradually expanded to occasional dinners at restaurants, neutral territory, where everyone could maintain their independence. Holidays remained separate affairs that first year, a boundary I needed to preserve as I navigated this new territory. This past Christmas, however, I invited my parents and Nathan to my home for dessert after they had their traditional family dinner, a small step toward creating new traditions that honor the past while acknowledging our changed dynamic. The most significant changes have been in how we communicate. My parents now ask about my life with genuine interest, rather than cursory obligation. They remember details about my work, my studies, my friends. When I share an achievement, they celebrate it without immediately comparing it to Nathan or anyone else. These may seem like small things, but they represent a fundamental shift in how they relate to me. Nathan has perhaps changed the most dramatically. After interviewing for the position I recommended at my company, he was hired as an IT support specialist. To everyone's surprise, including his own, he excelled in the role, bringing a work ethic and humility that had been absent in his entrepreneurial ventures. He lives modestly in a one-bedroom apartment, commutes on public transportation, and systematically pays down the debts from his failed business. We have developed a cautious friendship meeting occasionally for lunch to discuss workbooks, current events, carefully avoiding the landmines of our complicated past, until we had established enough trust to address them constructively. 6 months ago, during one such lunch, he offered an apology so specific and insightful that I knew it came from genuine reflection rather than obligation. I never saw it when we were growing up, he admitted, but I was handed opportunities you had to fight for. College car, startup, capital, even emotional support all given freely to me while you had to prove yourself worthy of the smallest assistance. I benefited from that inequality without ever questioning it, and I am truly sorry. My parents have faced their own challenges and growth. The financial strain from Nathan's failed business forced them to downsize, selling the family home and moving to a smaller townhouse in a less prestigious neighborhood. Dad took a consulting job to supplement his reduced retirement income, while Mom returned to teaching part-time at a local community college. The humbling of their circumstances has brought a perspective they lacked during their years of comfortable security. We were so focused on appearances, Mom confessed during a recent conversation. The right neighborhood, the right schools, the right kind of success. We measured everything, including our children, by those shallow standards. Losing everything material helped us see what truly matters. My own life continues to flourish. I completed my MBA with honors 6 months ago, which led to a significant promotion at work. I now lead a department of 12 people developing strategy and mentoring younger employees. The financial security from my lottery winnings gave me the freedom to pursue this education, but the confidence to excel came from within, nurtured by therapy and supported by genuine relationships. One of my proudest accomplishments has been establishing a scholarship fund for financially independent students who lack family support. Using a portion of my lottery winnings, I created an endowment that provides not just tuition assistance, but also mentorship and networking opportunities for young people who, like my younger self, are navigating education and early career without the safety net many take for granted. Working with these students has been healing in ways I never anticipated, allowing me to transform my own painful experiences into support for others facing similar challenges. My relationship with Daniel has deepened into a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine care. He proposed 3 months ago during a weekend hike to a mountain overlook, offering a ring and a promise of equality and support through whatever life brings. My parents' reaction to our engagement was another measure of how much has changed. Rather than immediately taking over planning or imposing their preferences, they asked what kind of wedding we wanted and how they could support our vision. The most profound change, however, has been internal. Through continued therapy and conscious effort, I have largely dismantled the belief system installed during my childhood, the one that told me I was somehow less deserving, less valuable than others. I have learned to recognize my worth independent of external validation or comparison. I set boundaries without guilt and extend compassion without sacrificing self-respect. This journey has taught me that family relationships, like all relationships, should be evaluated based on their impact on our well-being, rather than simply accepted as obligations beyond questioning. True love, whether familial or otherwise, uplifts rather than diminishes, supports rather than exploits, sees us as individuals rather than extensions or reflections of others. I have also learned that forgiveness does not require forgetting or pretending harm never occurred. Real forgiveness acknowledges the full reality of what happened while choosing to release the binding power of resentment. I have not forgotten the years of unequal treatment or the painful ultimatum that forced our separation, but I have chosen not to let those experiences determine my future or define my capacity for connection. Perhaps most importantly, I have learned that sometimes walking away is not the end, but the beginning of a healthier relationship, that distance can create the space necessary for genuine change. Had I capitulated to my family's demands that night, giving away half my lottery winnings to avoid conflict, nothing would have changed. The patterns would have continued, perhaps even intensified. By standing firm in my self-respect, I created the conditions that eventually led to meaningful transformation for all of us. The lottery win that triggered this chain of events was statistically improbable, a 1 in millions chance. But I do not believe I won those $960,000 by luck alone. I won them because I needed to learn that my value was not determined by my family's perception, that I could stand on my own and thrive, that I was worthy of good fortune and capable of managing it wisely. The money provided financial security, but the real prize was the self-knowledge and strength I gained by protecting it. In the end, I did not win the lottery for luck. I won it to learn how to love myself first. And that lesson has been worth far more than any dollar amount could ever be. What difficult boundaries have you had to set with family or friends? How did it change your relationship in the long run? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding strength through life's challenges. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself can sometimes be the most loving choice of all. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself.